The current geopolitical and military situations create a particular pressure cooker environment where things happen and could escalate quickly. What better way to respond than a NATO summit, which is set to begin in The Hague on Tuesday, June 24th. On the eve of the summit, Diane Francis, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joins me now to discuss what lies ahead. Good evening, and thank you for joining me on the program.
You're welcome.
So we've seen Iran retaliating. Al Udeid was American base, was attacked in Qatar. The escalation in the Middle East is definitely affecting the overall security landscape. And there is a potential for this conflict to spill over. We have the meeting taking place. Do you think that NATO is going to actually address it in more detail? And is there a potential for NATO to get actually involved?
NATO shouldn't get involved, although Europe, the European Union, as Mr. Rutte said in his press conference, is very much within range of trouble should Iran decide to get even more frisky with its missile shooting. So, yes, it is of concern. And Iran's misbehavior over the years has also damaged Europe in as much as it's driven something like 20 million refugees out of Syria and other parts of the Middle East, many of whom ended up in Europe. And, you know, that dislocation has been a little troublesome and disruptive, obviously, and expensive for Europe.
We recently heard about Spain trying to opt out of the mandatory 5% GDP spending. Do you think that this is a clear signal that there might be some sort of a break in the fabric of the alliance, of the NATO alliance? What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's a good question. There's a couple of things in there. Obviously, Poland has led the pack, and Britain has done well, and France, our nuclear powers. But Poland's led the pact because, you know, it's right there. It's in the neighborhood of where the war is going on, and it's next. You know, should Russia conquer Ukraine, the further away you get from the Eastern Front in Europe, the less interest there is on it. And Spain, of course, is about as far away as a European country can get from it. Canada's further, but. And, you know, I think it's very unfortunate they're opting out. I think that's very poor form. If you're in a political military alliance, you should pull your weight. And if they get a carve out, I think that's fine. You don't want them to leave or anything. But I think maybe everybody should cancel their holidays to Spain in protest. I mean, I think it's poor form.
And as we're speaking of this exemption when it comes to the 5% GDP spending for Spain, if member states are considering actually opting out from collectively taking that burden and taking the risk of investing in its defense and bumping up that to 5%, what is the future of Article 5? Because is it possible that Article 5 could be introduced and actually if other member states would be called upon to respond, they would have the skin in the game if they're already thinking of pushing back and opting out of having increased defense spending?
Well, that's really the ball game. It's an alliance, and there are rules, and everybody should pull their weight. And if Spain doesn't want to pull its weight, I think there should be some consequences, or certainly shaming. I think that's really unfortunate. Now, all that being said, 5% is a big burden. And if you're far away from the fighting, you know, like Spain is, I guess you'd say it's hard for them to sell politically. But on the other hand, I mean, I think they should pull their weight because Spain has other issues regarding security that NATO helps with and can help with more if they have more money. And I'm thinking particularly along the coastlines where you get a lot of North Africans in leaky boats ending up, you know, in southern Europe and causing all kinds of problems there. So, you know, perhaps, you know, if they wanted to allocate and earmark their 5% toward creating a navy to patrol the Mediterranean, that would be fine. But they can't. I think it's really poor form that they do that. So I hope that their minds are changed. And I think there will be a lot of pressure on them to do so. 5% is a burden. I mean, there's just no question. Poland has led the pack. Poland spends more on security than the United States does, at 4.5% already, and the United States is about 3.5%. So everybody's going to have to pay more. In my country, Canada's been an embarrassing laggard in terms of NATO. Trudeau was just hideous toward the military and so on. So Canada has a lot of catching up to do, and it's going to have to do it, and people are on side with that.
Let's take a look at the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, because that's the subject that we covered here on TVP World on our program. What happens militarily and economically once it's closed, and especially considering the recent attack? I mean, things are developing very dynamically right now.
Yes, I wrote a newsletter on my Substack called World War Oil, and it was in last week's collection of my newsletters. I write twice a week. And I've covered oil all my career as a business writer first years ago. And Canada is an oil-rich nation, as is the United States. If they are able to close down the Straits of Hormuz, and that's a big question mark because it's a very wide, lengthy strait. They don't necessarily have the boats or the manpower. I guess if they want to bomb everything in sight, they could do that, but that would really be, I don't think, anything they should dare do. They threatened to do it before. They couldn't do it. The U.S. fleet is there. Missiles are aimed at it. It would be very difficult. They would be interdicted quite horrifically. However, if they were able to shut it down, just blockade it somehow, even for a brief period of time, that would stop the shipping of about 30% of the world's oil, which flows through that strait to markets all over the world. Now, several things would happen and already have happened, which is why, even though it's possible that oil will be attacked in this way, the prices would go through the roof. They're about 78 now. They'd go way over 100 and beyond. Is that you've got the United States and Canada are now the biggest producers of oil and natural gas in the world. Then you've got the Persian oil states, and they can just flood the market to prevent it from getting so out of reach that a lot of poor countries will go bankrupt because they can't afford oil. And so this is what happened just before the war started. The Americans started to produce more oil, but the Saudis dumped a lot more oil on the market, which didn't allow it to go as high as it did until it settled down. So, that's the kind of thing that would happen. Now, the next thing is it would become a crisis, an absolute crisis for China. China gets 90% of its oil from Iran. And that's why China is putting all kinds of pressure to diplomatically solve the disagreements and so on and so forth. But, they're going to be the most victimized by all of this.
Mm-hmm. It seems to be gradually harder for Europe and the U.S. administration to find common ground, and we know that this meeting, the summit, which is set to take place from tomorrow onwards, is supposed to, in a sense, make Donald Trump happy. What's your opinion on this? Do you think that the European Union and other member states will be actually able to do it?
I think that's fine. I think it's absolutely going to be excellent. Mark Rutte was chosen to be the head of NATO because he's gotten along so well as a Dutch politician with Trump. Not that he has the same policy as subset, but Rutte has a relationship with Trump, and he's very diplomatic. Now, what I think all NATO members should do, and now that they have uniformly agreed that 5%, with the exception of Spain, is the goal, they should absolutely allow Trump to take a victory lap. That was his idea. And he has been right all along for years that most of the members of NATO have been freeloading off the United States. That includes Canada and most of Europe. So, I think he should be given credit and plaudits for that. I think it actually represents a diplomatic victory for him to have done that over the years, battering away. So I think that he will and should come back as being as marking an achievement.
Definitely two very interesting days coming ahead. Thank you so much, Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, was my guest tonight.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Claudia Czerwinska, and please do stay tuned here on our channel as we'll be back in just a moment with more news and features. And we'll see you there.